Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legend of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we will be going through Leblanc, who was leaked yesterday, but officially came out at 3:30 in the morning here in the United Kingdom. So that is why I am doing this video a bit late, but let's dive in to Leblanc.
The best lies are beautiful. Places to go, people to be. Surprised to see me. Are you certain? I've been expecting you. I am everywhere. I am everyone. I whisper truth into lies. What secrets do you bring me? Whispers of a rose blooming in the desert. Right where I want you. Smoke and mirrors. Seeing double? My move. Another rose for the garden.
And so that is Leblanc. I've already seen Leblanc, so that's why I didn't, sort of pause the video and take aim at everything. But now we're going to go over to Mobalytics and sort of review the cards and talk about the cards. And so here are the Leblanc cards. We do have more reveals coming, by the way, in, a couple hours as I record this at the normal time. So I will be doing a separate video on those cards as well, so stay tuned for that, and we'll see what we get. But let's talk about Leblanc and her followers. I think let's end with Leblanc, because there's been a lot of discussion already about Leblanc and how people feel about it, and so I think I'll save that for last, to keep you invested in this video. So Black Rose Spy, let's start with that. A 2-mana 3/2 with Reputation. When I'm summoned, transform me into an exact copy of the strongest ally that struck this round. So, Black Rose Spy, I would say, is an interesting card, right? If you can get Reputation off, which remember is 4 strikes from 5+ power units, if you can get Reputation off, obviously it can give you quite a powerful effect. But that ally does have to have struck the round that it's played, which does make it a little awkward, because you have to essentially make it so that you can strike maybe before you attack in a round, so that you can then get this off and do it. What I will say is the power of this card, I believe, is the fact that it can copy champions, as we saw in the video, and I think that that's what's important here. Any effect in Runeterra that can affect champions and is not just limited to followers becomes more powerful. It's the main reason why Hush is good, right? It's because it does something to champions that no other card can do. Now, this can give you an extra champion for free in certain cases, which does make it an interesting card, because all of a sudden you can, copy your Ash to get 2 Ashes on the board, right? You can copy your whatever, big unit big champion to get off their effect twice, right? Which is really quite cool. And obviously with a lot of level up champions, that would make them insane. And that's probably why they did add that little strike copy, because if you did just pick, I assume that, copying certain champions would just be completely insane. So this is a really interesting card, and one that I'm really excited to see how people play around with, because to me, copying champions is going to be the way to go with this. But you're going to have to find a way to get the strike off, which is going to be interesting as well. So we'll see about Black Rose Spy, but it does seem that there is some potential there just from copying champions alone. Let's move on to Leblanc's Sigil of Malice and Sigil of Malice. So this is a 4-mana card, reputation at cost 1, deal 2 to anything. And this is where we start to talk about reputation, and perhaps one of the things I'm a bit like intrigued about reputation, or like a little frustrated with reputation, I guess I should say, is that reputation in my head isn't going to go off most of the time till about turn 6 or 7. I think that's a pretty good estimate, right? Like, it could go off earlier. You definitely can get it by turn 5, I would say. You know, you could go Glory Seeker into LeBlanc, into Severe, into Kato, and if all of them hit their attacks, there you go, you've got reputation. If you get it on turn 5, then that's pretty good, right? Then this becomes a 1-mana Mystic Shot, and that's great. The problem is, in other games, you're not going to get that until turn 8 or 9, particularly if people understand, oh, this is a reputation deck. Don't let their 5-cost things hit me, because they've got all the reputation cards, right? The problem with that is then, on turn 9, having a 1-mana Mystic Shot doesn't really matter. Because normally you're not going to have, you know, a turn 9 play that uses all your mana, essentially. So it being 4 mana, as regards to 1, doesn't matter that much. On turn 5 and 6, that does matter, because it's likely you do have, you know, a unit of an appropriate size for that turn, right? But on turn 9, 10, it really does not matter, you know. Mana becomes less important, it just becomes more... What becomes a lot more important in those situations is, you know, the amount of cards you have, and, you know, the amount of different options you have at that point. So, Sigil of Malice, unfortunately, I just don't quite see it. Unless you are in the full reputation deck that can somehow reliably get reputation off by turn 5 or 6, I would say, for this to be worth it. Whispered Woods, on the other hand, is a bit different. And I think Whispered Woods and Mimic are the two reputation cards that don't follow that similar pattern to what I just said, because they give you extra cards. And that's what's different, right? Because something that draws you extra cards, the mana cost does matter, no matter what turn, because the things that you draw, you know, will also cost mana, and you're hoping to get something big. So something like Whispered Words, that does matter that it costs 2 on turn 10, because if you've only got, you know, let's say 11 mana, and you draw 2 cards, and those 2 cards add up to 10 mana, and now you can't play both on that turn, that could cost a game, right? So the difference in Whispered Woods is words. Come on. The difference in Whispered Words is that it does matter for the mana cost. And so this is a card that I think makes more sense with Reputation. And obviously a 4-mana draw 2. We've seen Salvage be played. Salvage isn't, you know, an amazing card. This is a slight upgrade in that the toss reveals 2 cards that, you know, you don't have if you're in just like a normal deck, right? And so this is, you know, something that Noxus doesn't have. Or definitely didn't have, so it's a good effect for Noxus. This is a good card either way, and you know, definitely in decks that, you know, can get Reputation at any point. You know, something like Ash Noxus will probably eventually get Reputation, right? Eventually, Reputation will be met in that deck at some point. It might not be turn 5 or 6, but it definitely will happen in that deck on turn 8, 9, 10, right? And so Whispered Words probably does go into that deck because it's just a solid card. Paying 4 mana to draw 2, as I say, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world either. And when it costs 2, it's obviously very good. And Mimic, I think, follows a similar sort of pattern where, depending on the spell that you are copying, maybe this one doesn't quite matter as much as Whispered Words, but depending on the spell that you're copying, obviously it could cost a lot of mana, and therefore, you know, if it's like a Vengeance, for instance, you know, you copy it, you want it to cost less so that your Vengeance, you know, isn't costing 10, now it's only costing 8, which is nice, right? And that's where Mimic can perhaps be used best. This is a really interesting card. I should probably read it, you know, for those of you who are just listening to me. It's a 3-mana burst speed spell, Reputation at cost 1. Pick a spell in play or in hand and create a fleeting copy of it in hand. So essentially, if someone is trying to deny you, you can copy their deny and deny their deny. That's a lot of denies in one sentence. Or, you know, as I mentioned, like you can get anything from hand, so an extra decimate, anything like that. It's a really interesting spell that definitely will have some uses and will probably be a lot of fun. You know, you could do a lot of karma shenanigans with this and just, you know, I mean, if you've got leveled up karma on the board and you mimic a decimate in hand, you know, you've got then, you know, essentially the tools to just win the game. You know, something like that. Yeah, you just copy a bunch of spells. This could be fun with karma, although, you know, Noxus karma is a bit odd, but it would be fun with something like that. I'm sure there's lots of things people can think of to do with this card, and it's an interesting card to say the least, and yeah, it's fun. It's a fun card. I like it. Bloody Business is a 4-mana fast speed spell. An ally with 5+ power strikes an enemy. Now this is, you know, similar to Concerted Strike. Costs 1 less mana. Probably a weaker ability overall because you've only got one ally. So that means if that one ally dies, you're out of luck, right? And the thing is, it's a bit of a weird spell because, yeah, people might look at this and think, well, you can use it, you know, reactively. This is something you can reactively use, but not really. See, single combat you can use reactively because your thing dies anyway, and so it fizzles their spell. But this wouldn't fizzle their spell. It's much more like Concerted Strike, where a lot of the time you are using it proactively. You know, you don't often react with Concerted Strike. Maybe, you know, I don't know, a situation like they've got a Nivea on board and they ruinate you. You might Concerted Strike in a Nivea, right, to get the egg die as well. Something like that could be a case where you use it reactively, but it's much more of a proactive thing in general. I guess you can use it reactively, as we saw in the video, as like a challenger removal. But obviously, it always comes down to a lot of the 5 attack units that we've seen don't have too much health. I think, again, you're looking at Ash Noxus with Yetis and stuff like that, you know, things that have 5 health that, you know, will reliably be able to survive something like that. And, you know, if you're in, like, all-in Yetis, which is a deck that I do have a soft spot for, with Tall Tales and everything, you know, you go in for the full Yetis. Maybe you could play Bloody Business because you're likely to survive with that. And that sounds like fun. So, yeah, decks like that where you can have 5 cost allies, 5+ power allies that can reliably survive, you know, aren't going to die to a Mystic Shot or a Static Shock or whatever. You can definitely use it there. But I'm a bit unsure in general about the rest because, you know, your 5+ power ally, it doesn't just have to be 5, of course. You can use this on anything plus. So, you know, it could be Asol, it could be Farron, right? Which will kill a lot of things, but not quite the card I think that this deck needs. But then again, it does help you with reputation. Thorn of the Rose with a 3-mana 5/1. When I'm summoned, create a Guile in hand. Now, one thing I've thought about a lot is, you know, a lot of people, and we'll get back to Leblanc on this, are talking about health stats. And this is the 3-mana 5/1, and you see 3-mana 5/1, and it's a similar thing with the 4-mana 4/1 that kill an ally to draw 2, right? That people, I think a lot of people still have this kind of creeping sense that Go Hard is still like a top meta deck that is seen all the time, and it's not. I think that meta cursed us all so much. We all got so used to the fact that every deck that you came up against had these 1 damage pings, and anything with 1 health was completely unplayable, that it seeped into our brains and is still there. And I don't think that's quite the case these days. I think if you look at the top meta decks now, the ones that have 1 damage pings in them are like Ezreal Draven and, you know, Twisted Fate. And that's pretty much it. Now, I'm not saying that other things won't come back. You know, if Withering Well starts coming back, if Vile Feast starts coming back, of course, at that point, forget what I'm saying. But there isn't as many as you would think. And this is a large part of why I think people thought Zoe would be bad. Remember? People thought Zoe would be bad because we didn't know that Go Hard was definitely going to get nerfed. But it did get nerfed. And, you know, Go Harding Zoe isn't a thing, you know. It isn't a thing. So Zoe became better than people expected, in part because of that. And so I think Thorn of the Rose, look, I'm not saying that it's a great card. Creating the Guile, you know, maybe it could be played in Yasuo stun decks. You know, it very well could be. You know, it's something that can block effectively. If they don't have a unit on board, then, you know, or if they say they've only played like a Felios, right? You play this and they play a Felios, you know, you can attack because they don't want to block with their Felios, right? So you can just smack them for 5, and that can be quite nice, right? But I don't think this is a great card. It can fit, I think, in stun decks, because creating the Gale, which is the 1 mana slow speed stun, is fine, right? It's absolutely fine. And so, yeah, it's an average card. I don't know why I spent so much time on it. Mirror Image is perhaps a much more exciting card. It's what LeBlanc creates when you level her up and you deal the 15 damage. You get an extra Mirror Image, which is summon an exact ephemeral copy of an ally with 5+ power. So this is a 2 mana slow speed spell, and I think a lot of people would think like, well, this isn't great. And again, I think the most of this use is going to come from the fact that you can use this on champions. You can still use this on champions. You know, you could use this on a leveled up Hecarim if you wanted to. You know, you could use this on any champion that has 5+ power. And all of a sudden, you know, it becomes much more intriguing then. You know, 2 Dariuses with 10-6, that will win you a game. Straight up. You know, if you're in that kind of deck, that will win you a game. If you're in certain combo decks with certain champions that you want an ephemeral copy of for a turn or whatever, then this is it for you. You know, Mirror Image is a card that can go in those decks. And I think that that's where you should see this being played. Less so thinking about it in terms of, you know, a general sort of what deck would I play this in. You're looking to just copy a champion, I think. It's okay with Kato. It's okay with stuff like Pharaon. It's okay with anything big that has a good summon ability. But that's about it. That's about it. I think most of the use of this card is going to be on champions and finding a certain combo that you like. Hecarim to me seems pretty fun. You know, you level up Hecarim, you play Mirror Image on it, you get 2 Hecarims, right, and you smack them for a bunch of damage. Sounds pretty fun. Especially because you can then leave 1 Hecarim perhaps behind so that you don't have to have them die. And let's come back to LeBlanc and finally talk about her. Because I've seen a lot of people say, you know, this champion is complete trash. What were they thinking? Why have they created why does Noxus always get bad champions? And I do have to agree with most people that LeBlanc probably won't be good. And I think it's important, and I think the best way to evaluate these cards, by the way, is always looking at their floor and ceiling. You know, a lot of people, you know, defending LeBlanc have said, well, what about Zoe? Remember everyone thought Zoe was bad? And by the way, I just want to say that I didn't say Zoe was bad. I said I was kind of neutral on Zoe. So I underrated Zoe as well, but I wasn't with everyone else that, you know, said she was awful. But LeBlanc, you have to think about floor and ceiling. And let's take Zoe as an example. Zoe's floor is getting go-hearted, probably, as I mentioned, or thermo-beamed, or, you know, something for 1 that kills her, right? But the thing is, there's nothing for 0 that can kill Zoe. So there's no mana trade that your opponent can make that is positive for them, which is important. Whereas LeBlanc, Mystic Shot, done, right? Gotcha at 2 mana, done. You know, there are things, and Mystic Shot, of course, being the prime example, but also like a 2 mana Thermo Beam. I'm sure there's others that I'm just not thinking about. You know, Twisted Fate's stun card. There are a lot of things that will deal with LeBlanc and leave her just dead. And because it's a scene ability on the 15 damage, it means that your chances of leveling up LeBlanc are really slim. I do have to say they're really slim. If LeBlanc had Spell Shield, like Severe, then this card I think would make sense. And then I think everyone would be like, okay, yeah, this could work. You know, this would be good. But because it doesn't, the floor is really low. And the ceiling for LeBlanc is okay. But the problem is the chance of getting that ceiling is also really, really low, right? You have to deal 15 damage twice. And then you get a mirror image, which is fine. But she doesn't create one when she levels up. You have to then do 15 damage again. So you're doing this 15 damage to get a 1/1 stat boost. That's just not that good. In fact, I don't know if there's anything that's that little. Like, does any champion not do any? I mean, I guess like Teemo doesn't do anything right when he levels up other than gets a 1/1 stat boost. I guess he is also just 1 mana though, so again, trading with him positively is pretty much impossible for an opponent. But there are many champions that, you know, don't do much. I guess anything that has to attack. Fizz is another one. Again, a 1 mana champion. You know, there are champions that do only have this 1/1 stat before they attack or whatever. But this requires, the others are all off the top of my head, just attack. They just have to attack, and then their thing does something, right? Whereas this is, no, do 15 more damage, you know, wait 3 more turns and do 15 damage, and then get, you know, this card that is okay. And if you've already got one, reduce its cost to 1. It's like, I don't know, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? I mean, I'd be shocked if Leblanc doesn't get buffed. You know, they've said they want to focus on the newer champions. I think I would be shocked if Leblanc doesn't get buffed because, I mean, to me, it's just too weak. I don't see how you can play this card. You know, I think the most easy comparison is Zed, right? Zed, I think, is also a 3 mana 3/2 champion that, you know, doesn't do anything upon summoning. And you might think, well, Zed's not that bad. But Zed represents, like, a threat, like a real threat, you know, and he's doing damage no matter what. You can't just, you know, if you chump block Zed, you chump block 2 units. And leveling him up, you know, if you use him with certain combos, with Overwhelm and whatnot, isn't that hard. LeBlanc is much harder. And also the type of deck Zed is in is kind of more of a combo deck, right? Where you use 1 unit to win the game. That's what a Zed deck is. So it makes more sense that he might be weaker because if you can get a bunch of things onto Zed, then Zed, you know, can win the game for you. LeBlanc isn't really that. LeBlanc is more of like a mid-range beatdown deck, but she can't stay alive. Which is not what that deck wants. That deck wants, you know, something to beat the opponent down with, but to beat them down, you have to be on the board constantly. And so I just think it's a bit frustrating with LeBlanc. And unfortunately, I just don't quite see how she can, you know, be great. And that's sad. That's sad. But don't get me wrong. I would be surprised if we didn't see a buff in a month's time or whatever. And at that point, you know, who knows what they'll do with LeBlanc. Yeah, I don't know. But that's going to be it for me. We went through the cards. I think, unfortunately, I don't think you'll be seeing much of LeBlanc, but maybe in the future that will change. I'm pretty excited to see if people can come up with a good use for this card, Black Rose Spy. I think that would be fairly interesting. And yeah, that's going to do it from me. Have a really nice day.